So long time ago, I should say, it used to be unheard of, or even a thing of shame for a child to be out of school for one reason or the other. And in those days, that particular child would always question his or her parents, and indeed the adults in that community, on the reason why he or she is not in school. But the trend has changed.
Well, the trend has changed. I mean, that will be a function really of which part of the country you were looking at. At least in some parts of the country, it was indeed a thing of concern to find children staying at home or roaming the streets. But that's where, of course, if children accompanied their parents or their guardians to the farms while they were supposed to be in school, then that wasn't of great concern. But of course, we do recall that in a number of communities around the country, there's a great deal of interest in the upbringing and formal education of children in the localities. But we have seen in our country in recent decades the climb in the number of out-of-school children. For a long time, we're dealing with a figure around 10 to 11 million, and the struggle to bring it down to single digit in terms of the millions of out-of-school children. But the latest figures announced by UNICEF some months ago, UNICEF, that is United Nations Children's Emergency Fund, did indicate that Nigeria now has at least 20 million out-of-school children.
That should also be UNESCO's recent report that, of course, it released. It said that report was based on what it said was a multiple data gathered from other sources as well. And talking about the 20.2 million out-of-school children, that puts Nigeria as one of the highest in the world. Out of 244 million out-of-school children in the world, Nigeria has 20.2 according to UNESCO. But in 2020, UNICEF came out, of course, with its own report, which it puts at 10.5 million, I should say. And of course, that has continued to increase, as we have seen so far with the latest reports by UNESCO.
Well, it is also the case in a number of countries around the world that recognize the value of basic education, that this is now regarded as a right for every child in the country or in the community. And there are sanctions for parents or guardians who neglect or refuse or otherwise do not send their children to school for at least basic education. And the corollary to this is that basic education is free in a number of countries.
Indeed. So there's a report also, Kingsley, from the World Bank, which it indicated that Nigeria was suffering from what it calls learning poverty. And what does that mean? According to the global financial institution, it says that the learning poverty is a category in which 70% of 10-year-olds, that children under the ages of 10 cannot understand what it says, its simple sentence, or perform basic numeracy tasks.
Well, this is a very worrisome data that, of course, we've been reeling out. But the federal government, of course, has over the years shown tremendous concern about how to deal with the challenges around basic education. For instance, the creation of the Universal Basic Education Commission, by which the federal government provides 50%, at least 50% matching grant to the subventions that state governments ordinarily also will provide, even though primary education ordinarily isn't the responsibility of the federal government. We have also seen some administrations, including that of the immediate past president, Goodluck Jonathan, try to ramp up facilities, for instance, for their Majori school system to ensure that they also, in addition to the Islamic studies that they undergo at that age, also have the benefit of formal education. But as we have said, there are a number of factors that have escalated the rise in the number of out-of-school children.
Indeed, let us not forget that there are also, apart from the Universal Basic Education Act, there's also the Child Rights Act, which strengthens that law and provides cover for every Nigerian child to at least have primary and secondary education and quality education at that. But as we see from latest UNESCO reports, that has not been effective. There are also other provisions by government to ensure that Nigerian children, have access to basic education. There are initiatives such as Safer Schools Initiative. We also have government programs like the school feeding program, which is meant, of course, to augment in the area of feeding. These are all initiatives by federal government to ensure that school enrollment gets better. But again, this latest report by UNESCO is not just of great concern. It's disheartening, it's depressing, and it's something that we should look at, Kingsley.
Well, no question about that. As I said earlier, UNICEF also had its own report indicating there are conflicting data. That's what I was just looking up on the web. UNESCO was indicating that there were some 18.2 or thereabout million out-of-school children. UNESCO is now saying that Nigeria, India, and Pakistan, of course, rank highest amongst the data of out-of-school children globally. But whatever it is, we do know that insecurity, of course, has tended to be a factor in driving up the numbers of out-of-school children that we have in the country. How, of course, then do we begin to bring down those numbers? Because the consequences are obvious. Those we are regarding today as out-of-school children, if they get maladjusted, how then do they function in the society in the years to come? They are merely toddlers now, they are infants, or still in their childhood, when they become adolescents, when they become teenagers, and then, of course, they become young adults. What do they do, and how will they be economically useful first to themselves and to society? That's our outlook for today on Good Morning Nigeria, on which note we'd like to welcome you to the program. My name is Kingsley Osadolo.
We also have a second topic today, and we'll be looking at the latest entrance into the Nigerian market in the, of course, health sector, a product called Anusen sanitizer and disinfectant. It's said to be one of the all-purpose innovations to guard against not just the dreaded COVID-19 virus, but any other variant or any other emerging variants in the country. We'll be speaking to that. We're speaking to, of course, the initiators or the founders of this product. That will be the second part of our conversation on Good Morning Nigeria today. I am Claire Adilabo Abdul Razak, joining Kingsley to welcome you to the program. It's a Friday, and I know everyone is always looking forward to Fridays, but we here, it's work. And here is delectable Ruth Agwale to take us on the morning news.
Thank you. Good morning, Kingsley and Claire. Always nice to see you both on the show. Welcome to the news. The Central Bank of Nigeria has been given the go-ahead to faithfully implement the new Naira notes policy as planned without fear or favor. President Muhammadu Buhari, who gave the assurance while granting audience to the governor of the nation's apex bank in Daura, also asked him not to bother about public criticisms.
Assure the president that things are going on well about the currency, as well as issues bordering on the cashless policy that we recently introduced.
So how did the president respond to your presentation?
Very, very happy, and he says we should carry on our work.
In a major push for funding and technical support for the Nigerian Energy Transition Plan, Vice President Professor Yemi Oshibajo will be delivering a keynote address at a high-level meeting hosted by Rockefeller Foundation in New York. With global agencies and potential financial partners in attendance, to facilitate activation of voluntary carbon market in Nigeria and on the African continent. A statement by the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity, Office of the Vice President, Laolu Akonde, indicates that Vice President is expected to interact with U.S. officials on generating resources for clean energy transitions for accelerated growth in Nigeria and other African countries. He departs Vietnam today on his way to the New York meeting. To other issues, Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, has asked the Nigerian Legion to produce a comprehensive database of military veterans with their profiles and qualifications to enable government tap on their expertise as ex-service personnel. This was when a delegation of the Nigerian Legion decorated him with a 2023 Armed Forces Remembrance Day emblem in his office.
Employment quota, because we have a number of these fallen heroes that have left behind their dependents.
I work with my office so that we begin to work towards the generation of a data bank.
The Nigerian Air Force says it is expecting the delivery of new platforms approved by President Muhammadu Buhari. The Chief of Air Staff, Air Marshal Oladayo Amao, made this known during operational tours to 205 Combat Search and Rescue Group Plateau State and 222 Quick Response Wing, Nasarawa State. The Air Chief said air power has played a big role in winning the war against insurgency and will receive a boost from the new platforms, including surveillance aircrafts and attack helicopters, among others, expected to be delivered to the NAF in the first quarter of 2023. The federal government's desire to look inwards and promote local content is yielding positive results, as Nigeria saves $300 million annually from buying barite from abroad for the oil and gas sector. Minister of Mines and Steel Development, Olamilekun Adegbite, stated this while making his presentation at the ongoing PMB scorecard series.
The ministry took over upon itself as a project, and in 2021, last year, we were able to produce made in Nigerian barites.
INEC has described as false a video circulating on various social media platforms showing some INEC staff at Festac Town, Lagos, extracting voter identification numbers from permanent voters' cards and entering same into their cell phones. Statement by INEC National Commissioner for Information, Festus Okoye, notes that the harvesting of veins from PVCs is part of taking of inventory of uncollected cards provided for the new guidelines for PVC collection. He said INEC has decided to establish a PVC collection process that includes an online component where registered voters could ascertain if their PVCs are ready after providing their details. A resolution that will see to the end of fuel scarcity in the country within the next 48 hours has been sealed at a meeting between the Department of State Services and stakeholders in the oil and gas industry. The spokesperson of the DSS, Dr. Peter Afunaya, presenting the resolutions of the meeting to journalists, said NNPC Limited assured that there are about 1.1 billion litres of petrol that will last beyond the ULTAD, which is in stock.
And we are insistent on such resolution that the fuel distribution system must improve, or the challenges must be completely eliminated in the next 48 hours.
That's the news. Do stay tuned for Kingsley and Claire just after this break.
The Central Bank of Nigeria has announced the introduction of a new series of 200 Naira, 500 Naira and 1000 Naira banknotes to be launched on December 15, 2022. These new banknotes will circulate side by side with the current 200 Naira, 500 Naira and 1000 Naira banknote, which will cease to be legal tender on January 31, 2023. Banks are now open from Monday to Saturday to accept customers' deposits. So, hurry to your banks to deposit only 200 Naira, 500 Naira and 1000 Naira banknotes in your possession. To make it seamless, the CBN has suspended bank charges on all deposits made during this period, and there is no limit on how much an individual can deposit. Remember, the current 200 naira, 500 naira and 1000 naira banknotes remain legal tender until January 31, 2023. Do not reject it, but ensure the banknotes get to your bank before the deadline of January 31, 2023. The Naira is our national pride. Let's embrace the new currency. This message is from the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN.
Wake up your champion with the goodness of Milo and get 50 grams free in every 400 grams pack you buy. Hurry, grab yours now.
When times are tough, we know that as a mother, one thing you should never compromise on is your family's oral health, because they deserve the best. Oral-B all-round protection. It's great value. It protects your mouth from harmful bacteria and also protects you against tooth holes and gum problems which can lead to tooth loss. It strengthens your family's teeth and gives them all-round protection. So remember, protect their future. Oral-B for healthier, stronger teeth in just 1 week.
The security challenges we have faced as a government have been daunting, from terrorism to banditry, to kidnapping, to separatist violence, to crude oil theft, to armed robbery and sundry crimes. It's undoubtedly the greatest challenge to the peace and security of our great country since the Civil War of 1967 to 1970. It's the kind of challenge that would have overwhelmed many nations. But thanks to the purposeful leadership of President Muhammadu Buhari, we can say, I want to repeat, that the worst is over and peace and security are gradually returning to the land.
This message is brought to you from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Every day in our country, senior citizens are discriminated against, disparaged, and treated with disdain by those who ought to respect them. We are all complicit in the way we have treated the elderly members of our society as institutions, families, or members of a shared society. Every time senior citizens get offered less than they deserve for the work they do because they are old, poor, and desperate, we are failing them. Senior citizen loses a child, and wow, they must be responsible for their death. Every time a senior citizen gets labeled a witch, is called mad, and shooed out of the way because they have no memory of where they were headed and look unkempt, we are failing them. We say, abeg, it all old, make it do die, make everybody for rest, to ailing parents, uncles and aunts. That's discrimination. That is neglect. When you see an old woman getting beat up and being accused of witchcraft, do not turn the other way. Stop and teach people that white hairs, wrinkles and hunchbacks are no evidence of witchcraft. Aging comes with a memory decline. Sometimes it's not out of place to have elderly people lose their way, forget details of their lives, and how to properly take care of themselves. When they get to this stage, they deserve your empathy, not scorn. Our ailing fathers, mothers, aunties, and uncles are deserving of quality healthcare and peaceful transition. Make their last moments memorable. Senior citizens have paid their dues. They deserve your care. Stop all forms of discrimination against them today.
Welcome back to Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the NTA. So it's time to join Alika Panachi for some business news.
Statistics indicate that women account for 41% ownership of micro businesses in Nigeria based on the strong entrepreneurial spirit. Such small and medium-scale enterprises owned by women are receiving training and practical business solutions at a workshop and exhibition for SMEs in Abuja. The workshop and exhibition are a platform for MSMEs to tell their entrepreneurial stories and collaborate with professionals and leaders from the SME industry to foster innovation, creativity, and business growth.
People have problems with having registration for their documents, like NAFDAC registration or even standardization like SON. So we have them here so that they can interact. So it's more or less like bringing the stakeholders close to the SMEs so that the SMEs will know what to do. Some people just think these things are difficult at times, but it's because they don't have the right information.
Let's take a look at Thursday tradings on the floor of the exchange. With business news, Alika Oponachi, Arua.
Thank you very much, Alika, for the business news package. Coming up next is newspaper review.
All right, let me welcome Chukwudi Okoli Waja, alias the boy.
Hello.
Good morning.
Hello again. Good to be here.
All right.
Okay, we have three newspapers. I'm sure, Claire, we can begin. We haven't taken the sun for a while, so.
Okay, so honestly, the sun is really shining with their stories. So let me start with the headline: Military resisting pressure to compromise election. Chief of Defense Staff, that's the headline. With the rider, Buhari vows to defend democracy in Africa. And you see the pictures there, of course, with the CDS and other government officials during the briefing on the fight against insurgency, terrorism, and banditry in Abuja last night. There are quite a number of stories. Just below that, Reps direct suspension of new cash withdrawal limit policy. Summons Emefiele. Banks, depositors clash over 20,000 naira limit. Naira redesign, 1 trillion naira mopped up, says CBN. And we also have other stories trending. Rivers government alleges plots to blackmail Wike over G5 demands. It's on page 26. Foreign firms bid for Ajaokuta Steel. Federal government begins payment of $496 million judgment settlement. That's on page 28. How banditry communal clashes claimed 807 of our members in Kaduna Ekwa. And Igbo lawyer Slam FG over Kano's continued detention. Nigeria best place to invest in Africa. Osinbajo meets with Vietnam's president. And Nigeria's religious rights not reflecting on state of corruption, EFCC. These are some of the trending stories on the front page of the Sun.
Okay, we'll also take a look at the front page of the Punch newspaper, which is the most regular paper we have in our review segment. It arrives bright and early. Above the name flag, we have the following headlines. INEC plans voting centers for 2 million IDPs. Election rigging, resist pressure, and opposition wants military, and defense headquarters cautions soldiers. Those are two riders to that story on the elections. Boko Haram not founded by Borno people. That's according to Al Kanemi, who is the Shehu of Borno. Reps query LNPC, CBN, and others over unaudited accounts. And the list story comes with a kicker: cash withdrawal. Emefiele insists on limits. Reps demand suspension. CBN governor says withdrawal limits will be increased or reduced. Customers return 1 trillion naira old notes to banks. and bills kept in CBN vaults. No banks in our constituencies and cashless policy can't work, according to the House of Representatives. Now, the photographs there on the front page show some seized motorcycles. These are commercial motorcycles, otherwise known as Okada, being destroyed by the Federal Capital Territory Joint Task Force along Airport Road in Abuja. And of course, this took place on Thursday. So those are the headlines from the front page of the Punch newspaper. Chukudi, quickly, let's hear from you, and if we have time, we'll go to the front page of Al Jazeera.
Yes, the running stories that tend to draw my attention this morning. DSS ordering the Independent Petroleum Marketing Association of Nigeria, Major Oil Marketing Association of Nigeria, and others to end fuel scarcity in 48 hours. The DSS says it plans nationwide enforcement if recalcitrance seems to still rear its head. It says it will deal with any threats to national security. Now, there is a pledge by the by the stakeholders on the product becoming more available. And I think that's perhaps more reassuring and indicative of decision by dialogue, so to speak, because there's a pledge by NNPCL, Nigerian Midstream Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, and the DSS again, to work together to end the scarcity. That was after a meeting with a Major Oil Marketers Association of Nigeria, NOMAN. Now, one would not know, I didn't get into a lot of details, when I was looking at that, whether the pledge of cooperation came only after the stake was raised, or it was a spontaneous thing. Whatever the point is, or however it happened, the point is that we are all sick and tired of the continuing, seemingly artificial scarcity of petroleum products. I think it's the PNS we should be talking about now. So let them do something about it. We don't want it to continue on and on. The other story that caught my attention is the reported summons, issued to the central bank governor by the House of Representatives to appear before it to explain the limit, to the cash withdrawals both for individual and corporate organizations. A story caught my eye yesterday when they said that the people who are really at alarm over it all are the point of sale machine operators. That it limits their business in a day. It puts a cap to the volume of business they can do if this is allowed to go on. And I think it might be one of the things that made the representatives, members of the House of Representatives, to summon the governor of the CBN. Yes, but remember quickly that the governor of the CBN governor, that's Godwin Emefiele, had a meeting with the president yesterday where the president said, please shun public criticism and go on with your work. I don't want to think that the president is saying he should not respond. That's not the point at all. He's just giving you assurance.
Yes, I listened to a conversation last night to one of our sister media stations where one of a House of Reps committee member was trying to explain the reason why the CBN governor has been summoned. And basically what I took away from that conversation was that they felt that they were sidelined in the whole process, that the law or the act mandates the CBN governor to consult with them, even during the process of, arriving at the decision and the monetary decision. That's one, that they were not consulted, that the CBN governor did not approach them, did not intimate them with, this decision before making it public. And that secondly, that the CBN governor was probably acting beyond his mandate. I don't know. Kingsley.
Well, the CBN Act, we must remember, was amended again. We had the CBN Act and what was then known as BUFID, which is now BUFIA, in 1991 under the Babangida military regime. It was re-amended and to grant the CBN greater autonomy in terms of monetary policy management, because in the past the CBN was largely under the control of the Ministry of Finance, Federal Ministry of Finance, that is. So it's part of the autonomy that the CBN is exercising, dealing with monetary policy issues. When you say consult with the National Assembly, consultation is not compulsory. And if you feel that a policy needs to come with the level of secrecy so that it is not circumvented in the end, then you also get ahead to do that. I'm talking first about the redesign of the Naira, which some have branded the recoloration of the Naira. But the cash withdrawal limits will, of course, create some challenges from what we see. Let's just let the CBN itself take some step back and then ask, say, look, what happened when it was introducing the limits for cash withdrawals and limits for cash deposits? Otherwise, you pay some surcharge. It wasn't introduced nationwide. It took off first in major cities, Lagos, Abuja, and I think Kano also. And it ran for a while before the then extended, because it was like a pilot scheme to see how it would work, because those were major cash points in the country. So these are some of the things that I think they should also take into consideration. But it is clear that what the CBN wants to do is to ensure that its redesign of the Naira is not frustrated by an open-ended access to cash. What it has said now is that if there are legitimate grounds, and I think that's a bit woolly, if there are legitimate grounds to go above the limits, then that could also take place, but there will be a surcharge and so on and so forth.
There are fees.
Look, it is clear, if there is dirty money will incorporate the cost of the surcharge into getting the money out of the system. And then, of course, you have the usual unofficial market, which we refer to as a parallel market.
Yes. All right, so yes.
I know we're going to wrap up. We are going to go to CBN issue. The concern raised by the Chief of Defense Staff is a very serious one. General Lucky Rabo is not a flippant person. A very serious-minded officer. Is at the apex of the defense staff in the country. For him to come, at a briefing at the State House to say that the military have been under pressure by some unscrupulous individuals, we just have to remind ourselves of where we are coming from. It was the same pressure of the Second Republic that led to the collapse of the Second Republic. It was the same pressure that you are having individuals from time to time who claim to be dissatisfied with the system and do not want the system to nurture itself, to grow, and so on and so forth, that will be selling ideas to the military. The military class, they themselves recognize now that they suffered a great deal during military rule.
That's it.
During military rule. And I think it was Chief Awolowo who said, look, we would prefer the worst civilian administration to the best military administration. In terms of democracy,
took a big blow.
Yeah, precisely. So I think we just have to be careful. We've managed and we are still growing our democracy. In May next year, it will be, of course, 24 years since we've had that 6 cycles of elections, which we never had in the past. But we also shouldn't take it for granted, because there are elements in the political class who assume that they can do anything and get away with it. And we are crying about development, which are the ends of democracy. And people are yearning for these ends, so-called dividends of democracy. They can't find them.
Our plea to them is to please stay neutral and assert professionalism for the benefit of country.
Absolutely.
Chooks the boy. Thank you very much, as always, and do have a pleasant weekend.
I always look forward to seeing you guys.
All right, that's the newspaper review. Don't go away, we'll be right back.
They swore an oath to serve our fatherland and defend the people. They traded their freedom, comfortable homes, and mortgaged their lives on the battleground for our unity and peaceful living. These are the great, fearless, loyal, and committed Nigerian armed forces who risked their lives courageously to safeguard our borders. But in the line of duty, many never returned. Nigerians, arise, let's celebrate our fallen heroes. Put on the remembrance emblem with pride to support the incapacitated and families of our fallen heroes.
The occasion gives cause for reflection and remind us
the sacrifice made by our armed forces in preserving the unity of the country.
All ministries, parastatals, religious and corporate bodies to donate generously to the Emblem Appeal Launch. Send your donations to this account. Account name, Emblem Appeal Launch. Account number 393-200-7526. EcoBank Nigeria PLC.
Wake up your champion with the goodness of Milo and get 50 grams free in every 400 grams pack you buy. Hurry, grab yours now.
You clean your teeth every morning, but that fresh breath feeling just doesn't last. The answer? Easy. You keep your teeth strong and healthy and give your mouth long-lasting fresh breath with new Oral-B 2-in-1 toothpaste. It helps strengthen your teeth and gives you long-lasting fresh breath.
So fresh, feel fresh, and feel fresh.
Stay strong, stay fresh. New Oral-B toothpaste for strong teeth and long-lasting fresh breath.
As the 2023 elections draw near, remember, evil prospers when good men and women only wish for peace, but never take a step to make peaceful elections happen. Are you a father? Are you a mother? What are you saying to your children as elections approach? Have you warned them not to let themselves be used to cause violence? Have you explained to them what the consequences of electoral violence might be? Do your part to make peaceful elections happen. Talk to your children. Protect them from unscrupulous politicians who want to put them in harm's way, while their own children are comfortable at home, within and outside the country. Let's join hands to make 2023 elections peaceful. This message is from the National Orientation Agency, NOAA.
What we face mostly now are flashes of cowardly attacks from the rump of groups that have been routed in one location or the other, moving to another to give the false impression that they are still strong. Our ultimate goal is to eliminate them altogether and restore total and lasting peace over every inch of the Nigerian soil. Sounding tall, we take it home. We are determined to ensure that every inch of the Nigerian soil is safe. That determination is there, the order has been given. But we shall continue to protect the lives and property of Nigerians and foreigners in our midst. We shall continue to work for the peace of the nation and deter elements that constitute threats to the people. We shall bear the full powers of the government to secure every inch of our land. We shall not rest until peace is fully restored to Nigeria.
This message is brought to you from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
It's Good Morning Nigeria this Friday, and we're starting off with our first conversation on out-of-school children. We hear 20.2 million Nigerians are out of school. That's according to UNESCO. Let's take this background report by our correspondent Abdul Salam Jubril for status.
Available data from the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization UNESCO reveals that about 20 million children are out of school in Nigeria. This figure shows an increase from the 10.5 million recorded by the United Nations Children's Fund UNICEF in 2020. Bauchi, Kebbi, Katsina, Kano, Jigawa and 8 other states recorded most of the out-of-school children. The 12 states at the top of the chart have over 8 million of the country's out-of-school children. Recently also, the World Bank states that Nigeria is experiencing what it called learning poverty, in which 70% of 10-year-olds cannot understand a simple sentence or perform basic numeracy tasks. Daunting statistics there. Recall that in 2020, the federal government committed around 220 billion naira, a credit facility from the World Bank, to the Better Education Service Delivery for All (BETSA) in 17 states of the Federation. The aim of the BESA program is to increase equitable access for out-of-school children, improve literacy, and strengthen accountability at the basic education level. Similarly, the Universal Basic Education Commission (UBEC) introduced the Open School program in the same year to mop up out-of-school children, with a flagship in 6 states in Nigeria. Another attempt to address the menace of out-of-school children came in January 2021 when President Muhammadu Buhari inaugurated an 18-member presidential steering committee on the alternate school program. The initiative aims to address the challenges of out-of-school children and to rapidly reduce the number by providing them with quality basic education and skills in special settings not addressed in a conventional school system. The recent data from UNESCO, however, shows that despite these programs and strategies to address the menace of out-of-school children, the number has continued to increase. Why is this the case? What is fueling the out-of-school menace in Nigeria? Guests on the program will be providing answers shortly.
Thank you very much, Abdusalam Jubril, for that background. With us in the studios now to discuss issues around out-of-school children, would like to welcome Dr. Ibrahim Yusuf Abdul, who is the National Director of NGOs, private and voluntary organizations. Dr. Abdul, good morning and welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Also here with us in the studios is Azuka Menkiti, education specialist at the United Nations Children Emergency Fund, or now known as Children's Fund. Azuka Menkiti, glad to have you on the program.
Thank you and good morning.
Okay.
We also have joined us in the studio the Director Operations Center for Nutrition and Education of Children Foundation International, Silicaf, Sandy Ayato Mobi. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
All right, once again, we're glad to have all our guests here with us. Let's begin with the education specialist at UNICEF. Usually data sometimes can be worrisome. And in the sense of out-of-school children, these days we hear conflicting numbers. UNICEF will give its own numbers, UNESCO will give its own numbers, the federal government will provide its own numbers, and sometimes you're at a loss if you're a public affairs analyst which of the numbers to believe. But what is not in doubt is that the number of out-of-school children in Nigeria is not climbing down. So how do we resolve the issues around numbers in the first instance so we know what we are dealing with?
Yeah, thank you very much. I do not think there are any conflicts in terms of the statistics. All figures that has been dished out are all government figures. No figure is UNICEF figure, no figure is UNESCO figure. But what is important is that it's very important that when we talk about the number of out-of-school children, that we are able to categorize the levels. For UBEC, because UBEC is working with us very closely on identifying the number of children who are missing education, and UBEC has the mandate for basic education. So the figure that is actually attributed to UNICEF is coming from UBEC. And UBEC conducts what they call national personnel audit. The last personnel audit that was conducted was in 2018. They just had a recent one, which I'm sure the analysis is ongoing. So the figure that we have is stating that for children within the age cohort of primary school age, we have 10.2 million children that are missing education. And that is coming from the 2018 UBEC National Personnel Audit Analysis. And then if you move up to the lower secondary education level, then we're talking about 8.2 million children who are missing education. So it's always very important that when journalists are interrogating these figures, they are able to categorize them and say that these are the figures within these different school age cohorts, so that it's clear for anybody to understand. But before I just finish,
take again the disaggregation of the numbers.
Yeah, the disaggregation of the numbers is that from the UBEC data, we have 10.2 million children who are missing education within the primary school age cohort. And then we have 8.1 million children who are missing education
within the lower secondary school cohort, because you know, of course, that UBEC has the mandate of providing basic education. So whatever whatever non-figures that are being put together that are much more than this could be the missing link for the senior secondary. That is our own opinion. But clearly, we will be very it's better for journalists and every one of us to ensure that when we are rolling out these figures, that we're able to categorize them. And because it is important, for over time, we have been able to come up with different categories of out-of-school children for strategic interventions. And these categories of out-of-school children have been put into different areas of manifestation and different dimensions of exclusion. So globally, there is what we call the Out-of-School Children Initiative that has been able to define the different categories of out-of-school children and the different dimensions of exclusion for out-of-school children. And there are 7 of them. So if people understand all of these 7 dimensions of the categories of exclusion for out-of-school children and begin to allocate these figures from the figures that come from government, it will be easier for us to do some analysis.
Okay, I think just staying on the figures, you know, the 2 figures that you have given us, if you aggregate the 2 figures, it still comes down to 18 point something, which is what the journalists have been reporting, coming out from UNICEF. So whether lower primary level or lower secondary level, everybody within the 2 levels are still out of school. Yeah. So I don't think there's any misrepresentation of your figures. But what you have, the information you have also given us is that you have government agencies also collaborating with you to come out with these figures. So between the time UNICEF came out with the 18.3 million Nigerian children out of school, both at the primary and the lower secondary. Yes, and now UNICEF says we have 20 point something.
UNICEF didn't say.
Sorry, not UNICEF, UNESCO. Yeah. That's why we're having this conversation.
Okay.
Yes. So do you also see that? Do you also have that?
Well, from UNICEF perspective, our focus has always been on basic education because the figures we have is coming from an agency that's responsible for basic education. So what I was trying to say is that the difference between the total of 10.2 and 8.1 and the 20 million of UNESCO could be the gap for senior secondary. So it means that it could be the gap for, could be the gap for senior secondary. Okay. But for us, the figures that we have is categorized across the basic education levels of learning.
Ms. Monkiti, before we bring in the other 2 guests, I think it is useful to establish the proper framework so that the area focus of interventions, will also be a lot clearer. A moment ago, you did say that there are different categories other than, out-of-school children at basic level or primary level, and then out-of-school children at junior secondary level. And you said there are some 7 broad categories or 7 broad pillars. What are these pillars?
There are 7 clear dimensions of exclusion that we have been able to use to categorize the different levels of exclusion for children who are out of school. Number 1 is that the first category is that children who are within the ages of 36 months and 59 months, that is 3 years and just before 6 years, who are expected to have been registered in the early childhood care centers who are not in school. That's the first category. Second category are children who are within the age of primary school age who have never enrolled in school. The third category is children who are in the lower secondary education level age cohort who have never enrolled in school. Then the interesting part is that the 4th level are children who are in school within the primary school age who are at the risk of dropping out. Because there are children who are in school already who are at the risk of dropping out, who if nothing happens to them, they will unlikely complete that level of education for primary education. That's the 4th level. The 5th level is children who are in the junior secondary school who are also at the risk of not completing junior secondary school. The 7th one is our young people who have never enrolled in any level of learning. And the 7th one, that children are adolescents who are in upper secondary who are at the risk of also dropping out. So these are different categories, and it's always important that people understand these different dimensions of exclusion for different age cohorts of children, so that it helps for targeted intervention and focused strategy and support for making sure that we reduce the number of out-of-school children in Nigeria.
Okay, so we want to look at the modality for coming out for this new data that you're talking about. You've told us that UNICEF collaborates with UBEC and others. Is this just UBEC?
Federal Ministry of Education, National Center for National Mass Literacy. We collaborate with all agencies of government and national level. Well, of course, UBEC works with NBS for their national personal audit to get all of this data together.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot. Let's thank you once again, Menkiti, for bringing up some of these clarifications that would be the focus of interventions. But Dr. Ibrahim Yusuf Abdul, what do you think about the out-of-school children phenomenon in our country?
Thank you so much. The area I'll take it from is from the area of the missions that Nogas is built. We discover over time that so many children become the breadwinners of their parents. See them on the street, hawking, and so on. Those who cannot do that engage themselves in so many dangerous behaviors. Insecurity situation in the country. I don't see any of us here who have children that are well trained that will go and be in the bush harassing people. So the out-of-school children are the founders of the major menace we have in Nigeria today. They are the major menace of the major challenges we have in Nigeria today. And that is why it is so important for government to rely on NGOs such as UNICEF, such as Nogas, to ensure that all these children, and some, let me quickly say something, some of these children are not in the problem because of lack of parent or just lack of parent. Some of them are there because they have parents that are not caring. Some of them are there because the parents feel that since you are in the world, God can take care of you, and they are just abandoned. And then they now began to have friends in similar circumstances but matured that lead them up with some dangerous behaviors out there. So the phenomenon is so huge in the area of insecurity. It's so huge in the area of menaces such as even prostitution. And today you can see the campaign going on political thuggery. I have never done it all my life. I've never taken calls to follow anybody. So those who can do that are children that are out of school that grew up to rely on some other means of survival. And so they can become thugs, they can become the so-called Yahoo, they can become kidnappers, they can become bandits, they can become so many things that challenge our peaceful existence in our country.
All right, let me bring Mr. Mubi into this conversation. I will like to use a popular phrase by one of my sister colleagues. How did we get here? There are a number of legal frameworks protecting the rights of children to basic and quality education in this country. Quite a number of them. Nigeria is also signatory to quite a number of instruments providing again rights or covering the rights of the children to. And you begin to wonder, there are initiatives also. Government has the school feeding initiative, there is the safer schools initiative. So what are the predisposing factors, driving each one of the 7 dimensions that she has mentioned?
Well, actually, thank you very much for this question. Well, you see, even before, before I respond to that, let me just mention something about the data you mentioned earlier. You see, there's nothing wrong with having numerous sources of data regarding these issues. After all, when there are so many sources of information out there, the truth will be represented. That's what I believe. And so many people also believe that. Regarding the issue of how we got here, actually, it takes time. Over the years, negligence is part of them. Like, for instance, if you consider the UB itself, which was established, I think, by Obasanjo's administration in the year 2000, the idea is to mitigate against the rising out of school children. But you can see that it didn't have any effect. So, inability to implement policy as they should be is part of the reason why we're here today. And then sometimes the environmental factors as well, peer group, and the influence it has on children is part of the reason why we're actually here. And there's so many factors in our society today that actually lead to why there's so many out of school children in the country. Some of them are religious, some of them are traditional, some of them are, like I said, environmental, and so many other issues. And regarding the signatories, policy framework, and inability to adhere to some of these critical issues are part of them. The idea about evaluating those policies over the years hasn't been there at all. We find that this is a country where people find it difficult, government find it difficult to track what is happening. How do we get to evaluate these policies to see whether they're actually working or not? How do we get to establish whether what we've been doing is succeeding or not? Nobody does that at all. Once people establish things and then we go ahead and implement them, and as you find out that evaluating those things to find out whether they're actually working or not is not there. And it's over the years.
We keep establishing more.
We keep establishing more and more and more. So without necessarily trying to find out whether they are working or not. That's why I'm very happy when my colleague mentioned something about NGOs. At least the NGOs are there to keep track of those things. And thank God this is an election season where we have another brilliant opportunity to, I don't want to use the word to extract commitments from those who are trying to come into the government regarding what they are doing. But it's actually a key factor in trying to establish whether these issues, these policy frameworks are working or not. We need to fast track our efforts in trying to ensure that those policy frameworks are working. And then those initiatives, those policy in which Nigeria is a signatory to are strictly adhered to. You can actually see, for instance, the UNESCO goal that 26% of our budget should be allocated to. Who's watching that? Nobody's watching that, and we're still out there. And so it's affecting a lot of these issues. And then regarding the tradition, we all know what's happening. Sometimes in some certain part of the country, like in the north here, you find out that there's so many people who actually think that school is a very tedious way of trying to make up a living. So they feel, why not do something else? Yes.
But that's dropout.
Yes, dropout. I mean, it's a lot of
in the south and the southeast.
Yes.
Let me hear from Mrs. Menkete, Azuka Menkete. Over the years in your research, I want to know what UNICEF found out in terms of the indicators that have been driving each of the 7 dimensions that you have mentioned. Has there been a consistency in those indicators?
Well, a lot of researches has shown that 66% of this huge number we're talking about actually come from the northeast and northwest of out-of-school children. And that about 65% are actually from the poorest wealth quintile. And 86% reside in rural communities. So all of these put together has been able to help us to identify what actually has been the constraints what are the driving factors that actually keeping these children out of school. And what has come out very clearly is that poverty is the biggest barrier. And that is why we have about 43% of children who are forced into child labor. So you see that when parents are struggling to survive and when resources are limited, they do not prioritize the education of their children, especially for girls. And that takes me to the second factor, also issues of social and gender norms. You mentioned about tradition and cultural practices. So this also play a huge role in keeping our children out of school. There are parents who do not believe in the value of education. I mean, when you look at it globally, in a broader dimension, you won't blame them because of the fact that there is a link between the learning outcome and the number of children who are not going to school. Parents are beginning to lose confidence in what happens in the school. What is also at the end of it all, so what happens? What's the change? So we're also concerned about the learning poverty. So that's a connectivity, that's a connection. So apart from poverty, social and gender norms clearly is affecting the girl child, because 50% of children who are not going to school are girls. So you can see that these are all the key factors. And then also there are also issues of supply, the supply side. Because in terms of the factors that actually keep children out of school, that's what we call the demand side and the supply side. For the demand side, it's about parents demanding for education. What are those factors that keep them from demanding for this education? And those are the poverty, these are the social and gender norms. But then the supply side also plays a lot of role. And that is where we talk about the data. We have not been able as a country to have a consistent, comprehensive data to show the number of actual absolute figures of children who are missing education and where they are, which household, which locality, which wards are they, which states are they, so that it helps clearly for targeted intervention. So when we begin to look at the supply side, a lot is happening that also affects the demand for education and generally affects the number of children who are not in school. I want to also respond to what he said. I want to say very clearly, it is not unfair to say that nothing has happened over time. Our government is not doing anything. Just last month, we supported UBEC to conduct a national conference on out-of-school children, where we brought different stakeholders, civil society organizations, private sector, different actors in this sector of out-of-school children to review the strategies, because we felt that we have spoken about out-of-school children over a period of time, over three or 4 decades now, that we need to sit down as a country to review the strategies. What has worked? What has not worked? And at the end of that 2 days conference, we had the Minister of Education, we had the UBEC Executive Secretary, had all the sub chairs across the country. At the end of that conference, we came up with a framework of action that outlined what has worked. What are best practices across the world that we need to tap into? Because Nigeria, even though Nigeria contributes 15% of the global number of out-of-school children across the world, but there are also other countries who are also dealing with out-of-school children. So we brought those expertise, those experiences to find out what can we do differently. And that conference came up with a national framework of action.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we'll have the opportunity, I believe, to interrogate that framework of action going forward. We've just been joined by another guest for this conversation. Is the Director of Nigeria Child Rights Initiative, Muhammad Sabo Kiana. Muhammad Sabo Kiana, we're glad to have you on the program this morning.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
I was curious about what the other guest said. That's Saleh Hayatu Mubi, regarding the fact that we keep churning out programs, initiatives, and we are not able to catch our breath in evaluating the impact of some of these programs and initiatives. I'm wondering, I don't want to sound cynical, because this is an existential challenge that the country faces in terms of the exponential increase in the number of out-of-school children. we identified poverty, identified social-cultural norms, and of course, lately now insecurity has been thrown into the mix. But let's be realistic. Obafemi Awolowo recognized poverty as a factor in out-of-school children at the time in the Western region, and he introduced free education. And everybody could see the impact of free education in the Western region, which of course continues to grow till today. And then during the military era, General Yakubu Gowon, there was a national development plan. Under that national development plan, there were also indications as to how to ramp up the educational growth in the country. And that was why in 1976, out of that plan, you then had the UPE. That time it then became the Murtala Obasanjo administration. UPE was Universal Primary Education. I hope you listen. So I'm trying to contextualize so I just know that, look, what have we been doing? Because Mubi tells us that we are not able to evaluate ourselves. UPE. Now, of course, after a long period of interregnum, when Obasanjo came back as civilian head of state, he then introduced UBEC, even though primary education isn't the responsibility of the federal government. In between, during the Second Republic, we had a number of states that, particularly the UPN states, that talked about free education. That's to say Lagos, Oyo, Ogun, Bendel, and Ondo. They did all of that. The military regime again, military president Ibrahim Babangida, we had a nomadic education initiative. So if we say cultural factors, this was supposed to deal with it. Then we also have the National Mass Literacy Program. And some of these agencies are still in existence. And yet, day in, day out, we are seeing the numbers rise. And I'm sure that in our various neighborhoods where we live in the Federal Capital Territory, you should find it worrisome, the level of vagrancy amongst young persons, amongst children who should be in school. What are we not getting right? Let's begin with Sabo and then come back to Mubi and then the other guests.
Thank you very much for having me today. Okay. During the UN and I get a lot of people talking about this education. Indeed, Nigeria is just one of those countries facing this global issue of out of school.
Okay, we have to, I'm sorry, Sabo Kiana, we have to pause you because we understand there is an audio challenge with your microphone. So we'll get our engineers to sort that out. But let me take the question back to Mubi because you raised, I've given you almost like a historical background as to what, because all of those historical issues we're supposed to take care of poverty, we're supposed to take care of social-cultural issues, religion, and virtually everything. And here we are.
The Amajiri too.
The Amajiri initiative, school out-of-school children, safe school initiative, and so on and so forth. They are busy collecting, they look like scavengers. But those scavengers you are seeing who are probably 10, 12 years old today, in another 5 years, you know what they will become.
Definitely. I was at Yahuza Suya there in central area. You needed to see these children all over the place hawking. And you wonder if this will happen at the Federal Capital Territory. I have more of villages down there. So it's a very serious issue. Not to talk about a lot of them out there in areas cement is very lazy compared to cities. So if it will happen in the cities down there, it's a very serious issue. I personally think, well, because there were a lot of policies put in place to take care of that. They were able to access education when they were young. But yet, you still find out that the number kept rising. So that's why I'm saying that there's something fundamentally that needed to be done in order to mitigate this issue. Otherwise, we're in big trouble. Just like you said, these are children probably between the ages of 6, 11, 15. So in the next few years, who knows what will happen? Because partially, even the insecurity we are facing now can partially be attributed to that. Obviously, when we look at that Sheikha who is almost gone now, bragging, shooting all over the 10 million that we are facing right now. So it's a very, very serious issue. And then as a nation, we need to go back to drawing board to ensure that we come up with something very, very vibrant that will take charge of all these things right now. Otherwise, going forward, it's going to be a very serious problem, obviously.
All right, Dr. Abdul, I would like you and Mrs. Ninkati to also, respond to this question. And it's about what we do with the day education sector. And I ask this question because the number has been growing. The number has been increasing. It means that whatever method, whatever measures that we have put in place is not addressing the issue. What, in your opinion, is the behavior or attitude of our education managers or the institutions responsible, for education in Nigeria? What is their attitude to the data that you churn out? How do they take it? Is it of priority? Is it given priority?
Let me. I mean, this question is very fundamental. But let me move away from academic exercise and talk on practical terms on what we have experienced as NGOs. Last year, but this year during the high period, cover schools where the children in uniform are helping their father in the farm. Now, how do you explain to a father whose child is the only tractor he has to allow that child to go to class when the child is the only support he has at his age? Now, luckily recently, NBS, Nigeria Bureau of Statistics, has committed several members to work with us. And what we want to do is not just generating data. We want to generate specific data in relation to where and how these children can be reached. If you travel from Buke and Toto, it's a farm settlement that a child of 3 years in rainy season will not be seen in the class. In fact, couples that were there to feed them did not see the children to feed in their classroom. Now, if you are changing policies, I cannot go to school by 8 o'clock, the family hour period also, we create another calendar for these children in these settlements. And farming is one of the major occupations of Nigerians. And majority of these children are the majority of the children I'm talking about today. If I am blind, for instance, and I have 2 male children,
and you are not,
and I am not, and I will not be again, and God will allow me to be blind, and I have 3 male children, and my only means of subsistence is farming, and my children are sighted children, they can see 3, 4, 5, 6. Nobody arranged for how I will feed. And you ask my children to go to class, and there is no even assurance that these children will go to school and come out and get jobs. I've already been pointing that even if we take these children to school, they will finish and they will not have jobs. So this background is important so that we will not be talking academically as if things are not working. The reason why those things cannot work, policies may not work, is because where I can tread to as an NGO, you might not be able to go there. And then what we are able to discover, even if we tell you, you may not believe, but it's a reality. Farmers are counting their wealth. They count their wealth by the number of children they have. Without this number of children and wives, they cannot do anything.
See, Dr. Ibrahim, I'm sorry to interject.
Yes.
Because this is almost like a 1950s or 60s argument.
Yes.
Because I'm saying this, we are all born and raised in this country. And there was a time when some of these arguments could be made. I'm not disputing what you are saying. That is the reality that we are faced with. But in terms of proffering solutions, why should it be that we are hanging on to this same mentality? What was then supposed to be the purpose of mass literacy and adult literacy? For an adult to be trained to say, look, recognize this. Your child is not your tractor. Mass literacy for you to recognize that there is a much brighter future if your children get formal education. I was talking earlier about the UPE. In this country, for a period of about 10 years, from 1974 to around about 84, 85, teacher training education was on scholarship. It was free.
I enjoy scholarship.
The federal government at that time, as part of the UPE program, introduced a scheme by which persons who had finished their school certificate, if you had your school certificate, that is WASC, you will go and do 1 year pivotal course. Those who had a lower grade in their WASC went for 2 year pivotal program, all purposely to provide the manpower to drive the UPE 76, which kicked off 76 formally. So all these arguments, the other person will say, and I'm going to bring in Mohammed Sabo Kiana now. Yes, you regard a child as a tractor, as a farmer, as a farm support. For goodness sake, the argument there would be, why don't you then incentivize the farmers using modern farming methods?
That's where I was going to call
Mohammed Sabo Kiana.
Thank you very much. It's interesting to have this conversation. So I'll take it up from the previous question you asked me about why we're still having this issue despite previous policy and all of that. I think this my colleague has also mentioned that it has to also do with the issue of effective policy and programs that have been designed. Yes, we have had several interventions and all of that, but how effective are they? And I took interest in issue of policy as relates to some of these interventions we have been having. And what I've understood in policy making is that there is what is called policy tools and incentive in when you are designing policy program to address some of these deeply entrenched factors affecting children's education. You could clearly see that most of our programs that is aimed at addressing some of these barriers to education, whether it is demand or whether it is supply side of it, don't have maybe those effective policy tools or incentive to really achieve the policy goals. And I think that is where we need to pay more attention to. And he just mentioned the issue of children being used as tractors in the farm, and rightly so. That is the reality up to now, but of course it's not going to be an argument that we should be having now. So what we need to do is to be able to have a policy that can bring an alternative incentive for the parent. In addition to that, of course you have to educate the father that yes, there's a better opportunity if your children have access to education than just the farming distance. But you also the father having children on the farm as his tractor is their own normative belief that this child is best used in the farm than going to school. But the societal expectation is that this child should be in school, and there are laws that are in place to say that this child has the right to have education. So it is all about having effective policy and policy tools as well as incentive, to be able to achieve the goals of policy. And that is where I think our policy makers and our lawmakers need to review and also have this incentive to make it work, because like the school feeding program, it's one of the incentives to get children to school, but again, how cost effective that is another issue that has not really been looked at. One of the important supply side that I would like to mention has to do with the issue of access to education. We cannot address the issue of out-of-school children if we do not increase enrollment. And we cannot increase enrollment if we do not increase access to education. That is availability of school. Look at India, for instance. India has a population of over 1 billion population, right? They have, as at now, they have about 99.9 enrollment rate in India. They have been able to address issue of access to school by making sure that there is at least a school for primary 1 to 5 in every 1 kilometer to a community. And there's also primary 5 to 8 for every 3 kilometers in a community. That's how they have been able to address issue of enrollment. Now they are faced with issue of quality education and skill education. So this is what we also need to begin to look at. What are the strategic steps we need to begin to to address, you know. And again, another thing has to do with the issue of prioritization. There is this philosopher called Max Weir. He talks about effective altruism in addressing structural issues, just like the Almajiri situation or out of school situation. There's the issue of, like in Nigeria, the number of out of school children, mostly if we are able to address issue of Almajiri children, getting them to school, would have solved maybe over 50% of out of school children in Nigeria. You know, have we been able to really as a country prioritize in around addressing that? You know, I know that we'll talk about Jonathan School and all of that. Again, it has to boil down with how effective was those programs, how in terms of incentive, in terms of really making sure that it's being used. So not to repeat what others have said around demand and supply side, another important one I want to mention is the security of insurgency that's happening. And I would like to use this opportunity to just mention that there are schoolgirls that are still being kidnapped in Kebbi State for over 1 year. There's no way you can go and convince parents in that community, you know, to get their children to school again and all of that. So these are some of the structural issues that we need to address if we are to really get back our children to school.
Okay, let's look at the effectiveness of some of the you know, policy tools plus incentive that you talked about, and see if it is something that can be sustained, or if there are areas, you know, they could be modified, you know, for better results. One is the Safe School Initiative. That was meant to, of course, address the issue of security. And then we are looking at the school feeding program, which is also meant to drive the demand side. Yes. So how do you evaluate the effectiveness implementation of these initiatives, and is it something you would advise from your professional experience to be sustained? Is there any way it could be modified, you know, for better implementation?
From our own perspective, the new thinking from us now is that we want to move from the business of schooling to business of learning. That learning, so if we're talking about out of school children, we need to begin to think about learning and not schooling anymore, so that the focus is on how do we get children to learn and not how do we get children into school
to go to school,
because learning can happen anywhere. And that is why people are beginning to come up with alternative pathways to learning. There are multiple pathways to learning. It doesn't happen in a classroom. Like the Almajiri system, we're also working with the group with children who are in the Almajiri schools through the integrated Quranic education schools. These are people who have said, I'm not interested in your building, in your school. But we said, but I want to learn Islamic education. But we are saying, while we learn Islamic education, can you kindly allow us, the government, to integrate basic skills of literacy and numeracy? So we are taking education to where they are, because they are saying they will not come to where you think that education happens. So we are moving from the business of schooling to business of learning. And part of what is happening best person across the globe, across the world, is talking about what are those accredited, credible, multiple pathways to learning that we can throw open, so that even those children who are out of school will be interested to stay where they are and still be able to access learning. That's talking about access.
Okay.
There are also issues of technology. I mean, we should be able to move with time. So we're also looking at leveraging technologies and innovation and bringing ICT. You'll be surprised that that child in Almajiri school can use a tablet and is able to access learning sitting in the Quranic center. Our research has shown that even in terms of reading, that children who have gone through Islamic centers read better than those who have gone through the formal schooling.
So we can't say, sorry, look, expand your catchment area, because it's not just Almajiri or those, because you also have school dropout, those who engage in apprenticeship that do not go to school.
So that is why I'm talking about bringing in technology, going to the markets where the boys are to give them education, market schools. That was happening some years ago, but all of these were dropped. So you asked about why are we not where we are supposed to be? What is happening? I think that what is happening is public financing is not enough. We are not committing enough funds.
I'm sorry to interject.
Enough financing.
I'm sorry to interject. When you say public financing, I mean, some persons are going to disagree with you, including myself. Is it that public financing is not enough, or that we are not deploying public financing that is available appropriately?
Fine. There are different levels. Financing is a very huge problem. In terms of bringing allocation, you talked about the fact that the standards, I know people mentioned it, we are not meeting up the standards. The highest allocation we have ever had was in 2015 when we had 10.7% of the budget. I can't remember exactly, but it was about 2015 or 20 whatever. We have never ever passed that in terms of allocation of funds, both at the national and at the state level.
What was 2022 budget? How much was allocated to education?
The second level is what you're talking about. Utilization and release. There's a huge gap between what is allocated and what is released and what is utilized, and how effective is most important. That has been utilized, and how much efficiency we have gained from whatever has been utilized. So so financing is a huge problem. Policies are not a problem. Nigerians, we have brilliant experts in this country who come up with very brilliant policies that over time they review, over time they come up with new ones, but what happens is in implementation, and you cannot implement without funds. And when these funds come out, like you talked about, sir, when these funds are allocated, the nightmare begins in terms of release, in terms of efficiency of use, in terms of actually utilizing it on what and how and where. These are where the issues are.
I hope, Mubi, just hold on, I'm coming to you. I hope at the conference that you had, you said it was last month or a couple of weeks ago, that some of the superb chieftains who came told you, either in private or in plenary, the ordeal that they go through with their state governments. I'm sorry, we are smiling. We are talking about utilization. For instance, ICPC has uncovered a scheme in some states, in some locations, where you are supposed to pay a counterpart fund to say